A brand new week and a brand new episode of One Soccer Today with Oliver Platt and Jordan Wilson. I am Adam Jenkins. And gentlemen, we will begin this evening. It depends on when this episode is airing, but we will begin with Toronto FC and more sound bites from Robin Fraser, who, of course, is getting reacquainted with the Toronto media and the topic that everybody wants to discuss in the TFC circles is the situation with the Italians. And there was a little nugget that made some headlines, or at least made the rounds, and that was the discussion about Federico Bernardeschi and where Coach Fraser sees him best fitting in tactically with the Reds in 2025. And we find it very interesting, Oliver Platt, that the question came up about wingback, which is something we saw a fair bit of under John Herdman, or more of an attacking, out-and-out forward type of player. And Coach Fraser chose the latter. And it was interesting how that information was delivered. Let's just say that. What did you make of the coach's assessment on where one of his Italian stars will best fit into this team?
I think he's right. I understand why John Herdman did it because, I'll get on to maybe some of the doubts that you have about Bernardeschi playing in that more advanced position. But I think when in an MLS context, when you have Bernardeschi and obviously Insigne as well, these two players earning so much money and being such a prominent part of your roster, I think you have to try to lean into them as your biggest attacking threats. And playing a player at wing back, particularly when you've got Richie Laryea at the club already, I think is a difficult one for me and didn't fully work out last season, even though Bernardeschi had a very good individual season. I think the team could be better if he's playing further forward. So in theory, yes. The question for me with Bernardeschi, though, and this is the risk and maybe what makes it less than ideal is just his consistency as an attacking player who's going to get you goals and assists, on a week in, week out basis. He didn't really do it in Serie A. He had 22 goals in 206 Serie A games. He was never prolific in that league. Had a great season his last year at Fiorentina, but that was really the only one. And then at TFC, it's kind of been a similar story. There's been flurries of real productivity, 8 goals in 13 in his first half season when he arrived in the summer from Italy. He in a spell last season when he was playing wingback, he had 7 goals in 5 games in May and June. Last season, he started with 5 goals and 2 assists. 5 goals and an assist in his first 8 games of the season, but then cooled off badly after that. So it's been these kind of patches that he's had, of top attacking form, and then long stretches of not much at all. And so that, I think, is the risk when you put him in that position. If you're relying on him, is you don't always know what you're going to get. It can be very inconsistent. And I think that was one of the reasons why John Herdman moved him back to wingback, where he felt he would get a more reliable shift out of him on both sides of the ball. So it's a risk, but it's kind of one that I think Robin Fraser has to take with his team because he's got to get more out of those two players.
And Jordan, there's no secret either that there's a desperate need for more offense, more goals in this team, and there's not a whole lot of budget to go out and find something splashy. So looking within seems to be the pragmatic and economical approach here too.
Yeah, for me, I understand where Rob Fraser is coming from because I personally feel like in a way that Bernardeschi is wasted if based on how this team is constructed and the players that you have, he's wasted playing a right side wing back. If you just look at wing back and that position, really what it details. Yeah, of course, we showed some highlights in the B-roll of Bernardeschi and it paying off with him cutting back on his left foot and chipping it to Insigne and getting forward on the right side. But at the end of the day, the reason why you play wing back is to have someone on that touch line up and down the pitch, working defensively and attacking wise as well. It doesn't matter if it's 5 in the back or 3 or whatever. If you have a wing back, you want them going up and down. And I felt as if it almost shackles Bernardeschi cutting in on that left foot and whipping in across or trying to cut in when naturally that position should have someone covering 110 yards back and forth. I think when you get someone centrally, my opinion of attacking players is always risk reward. And the players that I've enjoyed playing with more are just more consistent day in and day out. But you would have to play them there. If you're Rob Fraser and you're coming into this TFC side, you're looking at the players that you have that you can't move on, that are worth a lot. You're saying, look, go and try to win me something. Like, I'm going to focus on the players that I know are going to play a role within this team and play a defensive position and play, if it's a 3-4-3 or whatever, 4-3-3, you're going to build on there. And these are the guys that you kind of have to gamble on. I find with Bernardeschi, I agree with Ollie in terms of the stats, but you have to gamble on someone to maybe go and win you a game. And the fact that he showed spurts of stepping up in moments, I think I'll have more of an opportunity to do that centrally. So it makes sense with what you have to put that type of player, maybe a 10 position or a winger attacking position to try to win you games.
He just doesn't always look comfortable there. Like even when he's been put in those types of positions in the past, he like drifts out. He seems to prefer being wide and kind of, playing in those spaces more. So it's been uncomfortable at times, but yeah, I think they have to give something a go here.
Well, and Ollie, it's not just Bernardeschi that has been spoken about in terms of a tactical adjustment or maybe a new look for this upcoming season. And the insinuation that maybe he's more suited to a central role in this team as well. And that's something that the coaching staff might experiment with. Does that get passing marks from you as well?
If you are stuck with the player and you need to try to get something out of him, I think probably the way to do it is just to play him as a number 10 and take all kind of defensive burden off of him, let him float around and try and make things happen. And, in this league, it's been kind of a haven for that type of player a little bit more than maybe other leagues have, where that player has maybe gone out of fashion a little bit because of the lack of running and defensive work ethic they give you. But, I think in MLS, there are many successful cases of number 10s who are just kind of the players who make things happen, who provide a bit of magic. Can Insigne do some of that in a central role? Again, if he's on your roster at the start of the season, and I don't think he should be, that's probably the way to go to try to get something out of him. It is very much at odds, it has to be said, with what Jason Hernandez came out and sold, in terms of a high intensity, much more high tempo, hard working style of play that they're supposedly trying to implement there. But you have to work with what you've got with Insigne, again, if he is on the roster at the start of the season.
Ollie, when you look at wingers, right, and if you talk to them, you've interviewed so many, you've watched so much football, like, you ask a winger, what didn't you like about this game? Of course, some of them will say tracking back, but they'll also say, I didn't touch the ball. Like, a lot of the game was played on the other side, it was played in the middle, or the fact that it was just a bit of a fighting match, and it was going, it was one in the midfield. So many wingers, and even playing with them, it's almost cognizant if you're playing a central role, like, hey, we've been pumping it down the left side for 30 minutes, and our right winger has not touched the ball. He's inactive, and he's just running sprints. Get him on the ball. Now Insigne has no excuse, because when you're centrally, whether that's him getting kicked, whether that's him fighting, whether that's him saying, hey, I'm going to see the fight and not participate, which if I was to raise my hand right now on this date, I think that's going to be a lot of what's going on. Of, hey, if there's pressing, I don't really want to go now. I'm going to chill. Yeah. Regardless, he'll be in the mix. So this player that's worth bajillions amounts of dollars, you're going to put him in the mix and see what he can do. And I get the game plan. It's just finding other players around him. Like, if you're in that midfield as well, you're understanding that you're basically playing a half a man down defensively.
Two behind,
and then you're going to give him the ball. Is he going to go and create magic? You hope. But if I'm a TFC midfielder, I'm yelling and barking at the highest paid man, the DP, to try to get involved. And I don't know if he will, but I understand the game plan to try to put him there and get him in those situations.
One thing, just quickly to add, something that we always said, or I always thought when they were playing under Bob Bradley, and Insigne was on the left and he was always hugging the touchline, and Bernardeschi was doing the same thing on the opposite side. Why are your two best players, theoretically your two best players, so far apart? Like 50 meters apart at all times, They never really got them in great combinations. So maybe this could help with that.
And Jordan, just for an important clarification, what someone's being paid and what someone might be worth, they're two very different things. What was it, $1 bajillion that
I said he's worth $1 bajillion?
Yeah. There might be a difference of opinion.
People can't move homeboy on. It looks like he's worth $1 bajillion. It's a fee that... Ooh, it's hefty.
Fair enough. Hey, the Canadian men's national team is not too far away from CONCACAF Nations League play. Well, they'll be trying to win a trophy and a prize that won't quite be worth $1 bajillion, but a prize nevertheless for the CSA. And yet something came up yet again, all reliable, that dirty t-shirt that you can't just seem to throw away. Canada Soccer and finances. And why I'm bringing this up in this particular case is a notable lack of a January camp for the Reds. While the Americans and Mexicans were in action, having some looks at some younger players, something that has become a bit of an annual tradition or an annual mark on the calendar for those nations, Canada was once again absent. Now, there's a split opinion on this, and I'm curious to get your take, Jordan Wilson. Just how much of a loss is it for Canada to not have that January camp, to look ahead to some of the players who aren't necessarily going to be featuring, if even making the Gold Cup and Nations League squads? Or is this just a matter of it's not a necessity when you look at what Canada has at its disposal in terms of resources and the priorities for this year? Where do you land?
I'll try to be as concise as possible. Just give me one of these if I go on too long. But I'm gonna say that I don't think it's a problem for the men's national team and the players that have already been identified and that are the makeup and the fabric of this team. I think the bigger issue, and Jesse Marsh has addressed this, and I think has also been a part of the solution and improvement of this as of late, is just identifying the next crop. And I look at, you could say, big brother in a way, or neighbor countries in Mexico and the US. I think they know their U16, 17, 18, U20 pipeline and the players that could potentially make a senior call up. But for Canada, it's always like, oh, Bombito just comes out of the woodwork and never did anything for Canada at the youth level. And there's countless of players that they're getting their first cap for Canada as senior players. I think that maybe this January window, this is what that could be used for, Ollie, is not so much the players that we know and maybe a time for January to come and get together and form that camaraderie, but it's the hidden gems, the players that might be under the rug that Canada seems to find later on. But just think, if we could have a more concentrated camp, a certain place for people to come in, it just adds a little bit more to the player pool and the depth that we could have in this country.
Yeah, maybe. I obviously I don't completely disagree with you. Obviously, identification needs to get better. I tend to think like that's going to be really improved through the development of the club game more than the national team. The national team can only look at so many players at once, and I've seen these camps before, like in previous years, and they're billed as like, we've got to take a look at a deeper pool of players and we've got to get together more, and like what actually comes out of them in a practical point of view in terms of players discovered and progress made, I think has generally been very limited. It's been interesting because in Canada you have this kind of clamor for the January camp, and it shows the financial problems haven't been solved and so on and so forth, that we can't have one while USA and Mexico are. And then in the US, the conversation is this worth it? Like, is this a waste of money? Should we even bother? Do we get anything out of these games? Why, are players being too easily called up? Why is Matko Miljevic, who I believe got released by Montreal for punching someone in a rec league, why is he wearing a US men's national team jersey? And like, the kind of efficacy of these types of camps gets questioned a little bit. So Jordan's right. There are some benefits, obviously, to seeing a deeper pool of players. I just think it maybe tends to be overestimated a little bit at times. What I do think they miss, and why I think it does matter, and I would like to have this camp, if I could, it's an opportunity for the Canadian men's national team to be in the public eye again for a period of a couple of weeks. Ideally, these games are on TV. If they play a couple of games in this camp like the US did, even if it's taking place in California or something, and it's all done remotely, there's still media opportunities. There's still an opportunity for people to be paying attention to the Canadian men's national team, talking about the Canadian men's national team, stories around it to be in the news and in the public eye. And I don't think we can get enough of that in the build up to 2026. In terms of the actual footballing implications, I think it's kind of, much of muchness, to be honest.
Hear, hear. We'll stay somewhat related to the national teams, because when we talk about the Americans and all of the finances and money, and let's not forget, these camps cost money. There is something that came out this weekend that is a world record-setting amount of money, and that was the news of Naomi Girma's deal. She is moving to Chelsea for $1.1 million. Women's professional soccer's first $1 million player. She is undoubtedly a highly touted, a highly respected, and an incredible footballer. Clearly a player that Chelsea felt was worth spending that much money to acquire. I want to take a Canadian spin on this, though, Jordan Wilson. When we're talking about top-rated players, and it's an interesting question because you can take it in different ways. Who would you say right now is Canada's most valuable player? Who would fetch the largest transfer fee right now from the Canadian international pool?
I have two names, but if you need me to focus on one, I will. I can say both or what?
You take one
you're
because
gamesman.
Ollie wants to play two.
You're a gamesman. I'm going to say a player in a similar position, a similar background in terms of both of it being an Ivy League. German went to Stanford. This player went to Harvard. And I'm looking at a 21-year-old Jade Rose. If she can go to NWSL, wherever she wants to in the next little bit. If Germa is worth 1.1, and I know that she is, great player at 24. Jade Rose right now is worth half that, at least. Minimum. And that's me being generous. $500K for Jade Rose at 21, 5'10", strong center back, can play right back. You could use her in a position to really lead. I'd put her. But I feel like, Ollie, we're usually on the same wave. He's probably going to go with my other option. But I'm going to focus on Jade Rose. I think she can make some big money and big moves at that spot for sure.
No, we're on the same wave on this one. And I know a lot of people will say Olivia Smith, and she is a fantastic young player who I think is going to be worth a lot herself and have a great career. But honestly, like I just think it's Jade in terms of the player who I think is going to play at the highest level, have the most transfer value, whichever way you want to put it. She is the one I always come back to, and I can't change my mind on it to give you a different answer to Jordan's. I think it's going to be her.
The thing with Olivia, she's kind of already doing it, Adam. I don't know. Like, it's tough to say, right? Like, she's already at Liverpool killing it. And obviously, we're going to see her, could you say maybe even a bigger club? But I think she has that potential to do that. But when you're just saying like of a raw gem, like a diamond, an untouched person that hasn't played a professional minute, but is a professional player, Jade Rose. But it's nice to have this conversation. I want to be having it for the next decade about these two individuals.
And I suppose if we were to adjudicate, I think you could make the case for Olivia Smith simply because someone would have to pay to pry her away from Liverpool in the form she's in. Well, there is no transfer per se for Jade Rose, though I'm sure Harvard would love if that was the case. But I really can't find a reason to disagree with either of these two gentlemen. Either way, 1.1 million for Naomi Girma. Brilliant for the women's game. Good and player, the player of her caliber. Well, she's worth every single penny of that. And Jade Rose might be seeing her name there someday. We'll just have to wait and see. To the Canadian Premier League next, and we want to discuss York United, and we were going to have a long York United segment. We're still going to spend a fair bit of time about them, but something happened today that just fits in the box of what we want to get to. So let's park York United for a second and instead discuss Atletico Ottawa. Your connection is that former York United center back Noah Bate has signed in the nation's capital. It is a one-year deal, 2025, with a club option as well. And it is a bit of a homecoming for Noah, who, despite being a Torontonian and his European experience, he did live and play in Ottawa for a few seasons, including as a Westboro boy playing with St. Anthony Futuro alongside Tier Walker as well. It is a young center back duo. And for Noah Bate, Jordan, a player that we have spent actually a fair bit of time discussing, is one of the CPL's young, promising defenders who really has a lot of the tools you would want in a player of that position. He's also been growing every single year. For the reuniting of a Ottawa boy, a Westboro boy, to TD Place Stadium, this seems like a perfect fit for Atleti.
It does, because I think for a center back as well, the biggest thing I noticed firsthand in my career is looking up to players that have done it longer and that are maybe a bit better, wiser. He has the perfect person in Amir Didic to look up to and be like, how do I handle situations? Be more of a leader. I also think, too, there's a comfortability that happens when you play in this position. And as you alluded to, just his time in Ottawa, having someone like Tier Walker, a childhood friend, you go into that environment. He was comfortable at York and started to grow into his own, but he could take another step forward. Then the biggest thing for him when you're coming off a season where you were injured, as much as he was, it's just getting back to that fitness, making sure that you're available. Even if every day is not your day to be the best player on the pitch, be present. Make sure you have a full week of training and you're getting that, because the percentages that drop off as a young player when you're on the bench are astronomical. You just have to be in the mix, on the bus trips, flying the planes, making sure that you're getting all those trainings. But you're looking at a Bate, and I think he's a name that we'll talk about a lot in 2025. I think he's a heck of a player, but now he's in a position to go and really push himself and see what he can do.
Oliver Platt.
Yeah. I don't have a ton to add to that. I think it's a home run signing when you can bring in a young Canadian player who's already starting quality. He'll do great there. I want to talk some York United today, so I'm going to move us on.
Ollie, can I ask you a question, though?
I got a question for you.
Let me ask you.
I got a question for you.
I'm out. You guys have fun.
Go, Ollie.
I'm looking at this York United roster, and they had several individuals nominated for awards last season, right? Benjamin Mora, Thomas Vincenzini, Brian Wright, Noah Batney. What do they have in common? They're all gone. Should I be worried here?
Right now,
hanging in the air, by the way.
Granted, I will say there's a lot of time from now until the first ball is kicked. I'll say there's two things for me watching the league and being a part of it, and even being a fan in the inception. There's two things that you need to have a successful season. Obviously, health and whatever, but things that stick out to me right now, you need a few players that other teams fear. I don't know if York United has that right now at this moment. Fear. Not, he's a good player. Fear. Like, you're looking at film, and you're like, if this guy is on it on the day, he's hurting us. And then you need leaders. Straight through the spine. Like the Dom Sators, like guys that you could just count on. They're going to be there all the time. Dare I say it, even the 2 years I was there, the Jordan Wilsons, the loudmouths, the players that are always going to be there, talking to refs, calming down the storms. You need those guys. I think York United, I love the fact that they've brought in some players that are local, but I'm still looking for who's leading when times are getting rough and who is so fearful that you're like, this guy's going to burn us. And you said it, Ollie. The players that were that guy or those players in 2024 have left, but maybe new players emerge. But I just don't see it on the roster as of yet. So hopefully they add.
Well, Jordan, let's think about this from the fans' perspective and all of the incredible things that happened last year. Certainly the end of the year, Moore comes in, they host their playoff game, they win a playoff game, and it seemed like there was a very obvious course. You could chart where York United was going. Moore leaves, but then what probably stings more, because that one you could probably have looked into the crystal ball and seen, Mo Babuli and Brian Wright leaving for your biggest rival. As a supporter, look, it's not as though there's nothing on this team to look forward to, and I want to talk about that next, but just from that visceral reaction to seeing both of those players wearing orange now after all of the momentum that was created, it's got to sting for the fans.
It does. And I think what has happened with specifically these two players, or just the York United experience, is the fact that sometimes it just seems a bit hard. Keep in mind, right, this is from a season, even though they've had their most successful season in 2024, 2023, they didn't have an owner. Like, there's just a lot that players go through. And like on the surface, you see them play week in and week out, and they're producing and doing well. But I just feel like a lot of the off the pitch stuff really affects certain players. And then when you look down the street and go 45 minutes away, you see Fords that just has a professional atmosphere, and like things are very steady within the organization. I think that bleeds into players as well. They're just like, you know what, if I could go play for a team where I'm not worrying about where we're training or what's going on, I just maybe look at that situation as a bit more appeasable than the York vibe. So I'm hoping that changes. I'm hoping that you can have some continuity within that squad. I'm praying for Morrow. I believe in his ability to just come and just steady that ship as well with the Pasquale brothers. But that is just calling a spade a spade. There are two teams in the CPL for me that are just consistent and fluid, and you know what's going to happen. And that's Forge and Calvary. So with York and the Ottawas, there's a bit of change, and I think it affects some players in their decision making to move forward with the club.
Yeah,
I'm not going to sit here. Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to add. I'm going to leave it to the host. There's a little bit of a delay.
I'll be over here.
Me?
Yes, you.
Okay.
Go on,
Okay. I think that's going to be a big test of Mauro, was all I was going to say. I think he's an excellent coach, but no coach in the world can do it without a playing squad that's competitive. And I think they've obviously lost some high-end quality, some of the names you guys have already mentioned. Can he now, with maybe a group that's more local, a bit younger, a lot of guys coming home, create the kind of culture that maybe overcomes some of the star power they might have lost. I like kind of the idea behind a lot of the players they're bringing in. I just think that obviously is a bit more is needed right now.
What I was going to try to frame, and I'm going to make you answer the question you just asked.
The distance
Ollie.
between us.
There is a distance between us, a literal and figurative distance between you and I. 16 players at the time of taping have been signed for 2025. At the minute, only 2 of them are international players, Osvaldo Leon and Orlando Boteo. 14 Canadians, a lot of them of the younger variety. I'm not going to ask you, Ollie, to try to sell the York United supporter that it's okay that Brian Wright and Mo Babuli left. Of course, supporters are allowed to be frustrated about that. But what is happening amongst this, and something you sort of just alluded to there is a clearly discernible move to go more local, to go younger, and to build something long-lasting with these young core guys, and then these guys in their prime who have something to prove, whether that's your Gabby Batar who comes in from Vancouver, whether it's the 2 Pacific players that flood in and Stefan Yates and Adonai Jarid. And we're expecting more signings this week. But one player that has never been in doubt for this season, unless he were to be sold, is Shola Jimo. How important is it for Mario Eustáquio, Ollie, to get this right, to play this young man, and then it could suddenly become a player that could fetch this club quite a handsome fee?
Yeah, he's your X factor. I think, turning 17 this season, he's still very young. I don't think that should matter too much, to be honest. I'm not saying, obviously, absolutely burn the kid out and never take him out of the team. But for me, when he's fit, he should be in York United starting 11 as much as possible. You wouldn't normally say that about a player his age, but you're seeing these highlights here, like what he was able to show as a 16-year-old in a professional league. I don't think we've seen in this league's history in the short periods that he's been with York United and playing CPL games. So if you're not trying to tap into that at every opportunity, if you're not trying to promote him as a big part of what you're doing and a star player in this team, I'm not sure why that wouldn't be the case, and I expect it will be.
Jordan, Jesse Marsh is demanding it from the heavens. It's not a subtle, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. It's like, hey, Moro, he's probably texting him every day. Play Shola. Play him some more. Please play Shola. Is that the right strategy?
Yeah, I think so. I think when you see this player play, there's no question that he wants it. Like, he wants it bad. And I think at 16, you're like, oh, he hasn't played over a dozen matches. But when you look at his product and his output and what he brings, you got to play him. I know Mauro Eustáquio and the Pascual brothers believe in him, and they will play him. But I think giving him a position to succeed and making sure you know when to scale back and when's that time to rest him, when's that time to push him, when's that time to take him off after 60 minutes, I think they'll get that right. But look, this name, Shola Jimo, we will be hearing for years to come. And I really believe this year is going to be huge for him, for the club, but also internationally.
More Canadian Premier League news tomorrow on the program. But for now, to our Tony Bet top picks. The Tony Bet top picks, and we will begin, Oliver Platt, by looking ahead to Wednesday's UEFA Champions League fixtures. Jonathan David and Lille are favored at plus 102 against Feyenoord at plus 270. What do you think?
Massive game, obviously, on the final match day of the initial stage of the Champions League, and both teams, still playing with a lot to play for. They've both kind of overachieved, I think, Lille and Feyenoord, and it didn't do Lille any favors that Feyenoord were able to win last week. So I'm going to back Lille at home. I think they're the stronger team. Jonathan Davids, let's go.
Jordan Wilson, your Gunners, they are heavy favorites, minus 154 against Girona at plus 400.
What's the date today? 27th?
Monday, the 27th.
Arsenal are either winning the English Premier League or they're winning the Champions League this season. Remember, I said it, okay? And don't worry, guys, I'm not being crazy.
In fact, it has been clipped.
They're winning 1 or 2. They're taking Girona. This is not even a challenge. We're going to win by at least 2 goals.
Ollie, MK Dons, are they winning anything of significance? They're minus 189 against Harrogate Town at plus 440.
Milton Keynes!
If you're asking if they're winning anything of significance, the answer is no.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where we'll end the show. See you tomorrow. This has been One Soccer Today with Platt, Wilson, and